Avengers Endgame came out April 26th, 2019. Today, the date is March 16th, 2024. It's been over 5 years since one of the greatest movies in all of cinema released, and God, do I miss it. If I could go back to 5 years ago to experience this for the first time, I would. And I would enjoy it even more knowing that this will never happen again. Avengers Infinity War and Endgame were the peak of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and what it feels like now is that they were the peak of superhero genres entirely. The only event that came even remotely close to this was Spider-Man No Way Home, and unfortunately, that movie felt like an outlier in the mass media of projects that we've gotten over the years that haven't stuck the landing. I remember standing in the kitchen 5 years ago, telling my mom that Avengers Endgame tickets had just gone on sale. I remember distinctly, I was freaking out, running back and forth. And in fact, when I went on the Regal website to buy the ticket, the entire website shut down. Everything crashed because so many people were fighting to get the tickets as fast as possible. I remember knowing that this was 22 years in the making. I remember buying the tickets for me, my mom, and my dad, remembering the relief as I knew that my seats had been confirmed. I remember the 3 days between April 22nd and April 26th where there were spoilers all over the internet and everyone was trying to avoid them. I remember being addicted to my phone and that this movie was the only thing that could get me off social media so that it didn't get spoiled to me. And I remember walking into the theater completely anxious and nervous because I knew that this would either be the greatest experience in cinematic history for me or the worst. I remember the emotions I felt when Iron Man and Black Widow died, when Tony Stark finally did the snap, when Captain America lifted Mjolnir, when Thanos came through the portal. I remember the credit scene where everyone was crying and clapping and it was absolute beauty. Oh my, how we have fallen. Where are we now? The sheer change in quality, the sheer change in hype, the sheer change in conversations, not just online, but even in person. I mean, Marvel used to be all the hype. It's all anyone ever talked about. And where are we now? Secret Invasion, She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, Hawkeye, Thor Love and Thunder, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, The Marvels, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. What is going on with the MCU? I feel like after Endgame, a lot of people were really anxious that the hype wouldn't last and that Marvel wouldn't really know where to go, but I was actually really confident. I was super excited for WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier because at that point, those were the only shows that were really announced. I mean, sure, they talked about Loki and some other projects. Obviously, Far From Home was going to come out. Those were the main ones, and everyone was really hyped. This was a new era for Marvel. They were going to branch out to TV shows and it would give us so much new content that would be really exciting to look forward to. I remember everyone was really excited to watch Far From Home, and while many people didn't like it, it was still a really good opening to a new phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When WandaVision started, everyone was so hyped for it. Everyone would watch every single episode and analyze it. It was all anyone ever talked about, and we thought this is how it would be for every single project in the MCU. An episode will come out and people will talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And then the next episode will come out and there's going to be all these special Easter eggs, really good writing and really cool stuff. And then slowly Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out, and Loki, which admittedly was pretty good, and more projects and more projects, and eventually people just stopped caring. Everyone knows there was a giant burnout, a big fatigue, a universal issue that Marvel failed to recognize. And the fact was that it was possible to get too much content. Marvel's biggest failure was forgetting that the audience isn't stupid, and also that we're growing up just like they are. One thing Marvel was always really good at was introducing comic characters that people didn't really know or care for. Before 2008, no one cared or talked about Iron Man like that. Same thing with so many different characters. Spider-Man was an exception, but characters like Doctor Strange, characters like the Scarlet Witch, I mean, these were all cool comic characters, but the MCU really popularized them to general modern media. Unfortunately, after Endgame, they failed to do this. They failed to continue to introduce amazing characters. I mean, Taskmaster from Black Widow could have been the new Bucky Barnes from Winter Soldier. Instead, Taskmaster just became a forgettable villain that no one really cared about. We thought the X-Men were being introduced into the MCU after Phase 3 and WandaVision. Instead, we got a weird joke. And of course, now they're finally doing it. And their way to segue it was the Marvels. I mean, sure, Miss Marvel is technically a mutant. I don't want to watch 4 different projects to get introduced to the X-Men in the MCU. A prime example of this is She-Hulk. She-Hulk was a great character in the comics. I mean, she was actually pretty cool, but instead they made an entire show about her and somehow managed to make her more unlikable than the antagonists. That is a skill in itself. Congratulations, Marvel. And I think the worst part is that their comeback whenever someone judged Marvel was trust the process, Or you're just a hater. When people didn't like Phase 4 projects, it was you don't like diversity. When people didn't like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, people said it's because you don't want a black Captain America. When people didn't like She-Hulk, it was because they said you don't like girl characters. There is countless female characters in the MCU that we absolutely loved way before Phase 4 ever happened. Diversity was never an issue, I promise. What Marvel needed to do was take responsibility and take accountability for their lack of quality and lack of consistency. With that being said, let's get into the last part of this video. A lot of the sentences I said in this video started with "I remember when," but what I want the takeaway from this video to be is that I think it is possible, is that maybe there's a sliver of hope. Maybe Marvel can be great again. It's been a rough 5 years. What I want is to feel scared in the theater, not knowing what's going to happen, anxious from the anticipation of not knowing what the villain on screen will do. What I want is an antagonist that I can almost empathize with. What I want is to feel cinematography and acting in my soul the way I did in Infinity War and Endgame. What I want is incredible origin stories like Black Panther and Doctor Strange. What I want is more good TV shows like Loki. What I want is more humor like Thor Ragnarok. What I want is more character development like Iron Man. What I want is more script like Thanos and Ultron. What I want is more choreography like the Winter Soldier. What I want is more directors like the Russo brothers. And maybe this is all just wishful thinking. Prime Marvel was 2014 to 2019 and we didn't even realize it. We blinked and then it was gone. Like many things in life, we took that era for granted, and I just wish I could experience Endgame for the first time in theaters again. This is one of those movies that will be viewed as a great, even 25 years from now, people will always talk about it. It will age really, really well. I mean, these are the types of movies that we'll tell our kids about, telling them how special we felt watching them in the theaters. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I do believe that Marvel can regain the hype that they once had. I guess all we can do is wait and see if they actually start listening to their fans.